Hi everyone, it's me again, and the greetings. I don't necessarily want to be super like hee tee hee haha cheery at the start of this video. Sorry if you can't hear me moving the mic also, because of the topics that we're discussing today. Trigger warning for DA and SA. If you don't know what that is, assume the worst. So today we are violating the typical sort of rule that I have on this channel, where I typically only talk about Amberlynn every 4 to 6 months or so. Recently, old allegations have been resurfaced by video essayist and I would say friend of the channel, Mr. Snowflake, regarding the relationship that Amberlynn Reid was in prior to the first one documented on YouTube, which was Crystal, with their partner who now goes by Casey. But first, links, sources, ways to support the channel, along with all of my social media down below. Thank you to my current patrons and members, names on screen. So this video is going to go through the context of the situation, the current events, and expand to the community context for those who may not be familiar. So there's going to be 3 parts to the video today. Part 1, who is Casey and the relevance of the situation and what's happened. Part 2, Amberlynn Reid's response. And Part 3, the sort of shift within the context of the girl world community as a result of these pretty serious allegations. So Part 1, who is Casey and the relevance? So if we go back to early 2022, where I still lived in my god-awful student accommodation apartment, I made my first video on Amberlynn Reid titled The Rhetoric of Amberlynn Reid. In this video, I delved into the concept of what a reaction channel is, the general community around Amberlynn Reid's cycle. I also talked about what it is meant for there to be an era when talking about Amberlynn Reid. Oh Lordy, as Jordy refers to them as seasons, but typically it's one of those two things. Amberlynn is typically associated with eras relating to the relationship, one of the many public relationships she's been in on her channel. So this time frame, of the November of 2013, was Crystal was the girlfriend that Amberlynn had. There is another relationship that you hear about here and there after a person who's now goes by Casey, but that is not really what I'm going to get into, because a lot of allegations and issues there that are beyond kind of my scope of understanding and that are very heavy topics. I'll put the trigger warnings at the beginning because I forgot to put them in now. But that Right Opinions documentary, I believe Jay Aubrey has one too. If not, I know lots of other people have videos on it. You can kind of look into the whole Casey thing yourself if you so desire. Right. I also talked about Casey as one of Amberlynn's partners before Crystal, but I skipped it. And in this video, I talked about Casey, but I made a point to kind of skip over it because I felt like I didn't know enough about what happened or the context around it. And I got into the Amberverse in 2019 rather, sorry. So that is about 3 years after it came back up and over a decade after it happened. So I just didn't feel like I was equipped to speak about it. This because this sort of drama, if you will, like the drama component of it and Amberlynn's response to the initial video and things like that, came out in the Destiny era, which was from roughly, if I recall, 2015 to 27, like very late 2017, early 2018, if I remember correctly. So this was also because the Casey situation involved very serious allegations of domestic and sexual abuse, and I was worried that I could misrepresent this in some way. But given my time developing as a creator, learning more about Amberlynn and the patterns and her treatment of other partners, and I feel like I'm able to outline the events and the seriousness around them. Because since that time of making that video, her and Becky's relationship ended, and Becky came out and spoke briefly about some of the things that happened to them. Destiny came out and spoke about her experience with Amberlynn Reid as well, bringing a lot of these behaviors back up. Like, it seemed like there was a pattern forming. This is the information that I gathered from Mr. Snowflake's documentary and other videos about this particular situation. So Casey and Amberlynn were talking online when Amber was a senior in high school. So Casey has their dead name, obviously, but also, like, they had a pseudonym when they were talking to Amberlynn, and the pseudonym was Amara, which was an anime character. Amberlynn was roughly 17 when they started talking, and Casey was 15. They were long distance because Amberlynn Reid lived in Oklahoma at the time, and if I recall, Casey lived in the South somewhere. When Amber was 18 and Casey was 16, Casey had Amber visit him to go to an anime convention. Upon Amberlynn Reid arriving, her grandmother called Amber and said, "You are not welcome back to Oklahoma. You stay wherever, I don't care." And stayed with Casey and his mom in this very small sort of bachelor apartment. Amberlynn Reid moved in had allegedly poor personal hygiene, poor general hygiene, as in she wouldn't clean her clothes or her belongings or anything else in the apartment, made a point to not clean, period, as I mentioned, posted publicly on social media about how much she hated the people that she lived with, particularly Casey's mom, but very particularly Casey's mom's boyfriend, which Casey doesn't seem to speak too highly of either, so I think there was just something going on there. Amber would go through Casey's phone, wouldn't let him hang out with lifelong friends of his, grabbed him, scratched him, took advantage of him sexually, punched him, ruined drawings and art pieces, smashed his phone, and made fun of him for being trans and using binders. To this, Amber said, apparently to Casey, this comes out in the interview, that Amber is not going to date a boy, or not. Amber would not be with a boy.
And the story where she says that, she wasn't mad at me for being trans, she was. Because the way I came out to three people this way. I watched the movie Boys Don't Cry when I was 12. I think I said this is my coming out story. I watched the movie Boys Don't Cry when I was 12, and I was like, I could be like that. That's possible? Okay. And I was like, all right, okay. And I felt connected to the main character because it just resonated in me at 12. And as I got older, I started dressing in more boy clothes. And I'm like, yes, I understand this. I can be like that. And when I showed her the movie. I did this with three. I showed them the movie first. I said, let's watch this movie. I love this movie. We watched it, and she's like, oh my God, this is really good. And I said, I am the main character. I feel what the main character feels. I don't want to be a girl. I want to be a boy. And she goes, well, I'm not going to date a boy. I like dating a girl. And I was like, okay. And I said, and she was like upset about it. And when I told her, I said, well, when I have kids, I don't want to be called mom. I don't want to be called mama. I want to be called papa. I've always wanted that. She looks at me and she goes, you'll never be a father. Why papa? You're not a guy. You'll never be their father. And it broke my heart.
Amberlynn Reid also posted on Ask FM defending pedophilia, and I'll put a clip of that in now.
Quick little video. I've just seen Amber's Instagram Q&A thing, because somebody asked her, do you still stand by your comments where you defended on Ask FM from years ago?
It is not a matter of you can't help how you feel. Actually, it is. It's a sickness, just like cancer, or depression, or obesity. It's a sickness. You cannot control sickness. You can get help, but that only goes so far.
And to justify it, Amber says that she was married by a father's friends. Amber, on your Ask FM, you've got two totally different stories about you being, and it's not your father's friends.
I've been going through Amber's Ask FM, doing a little series on the same channel, reading out the Ask FM stuff and trying to make it funny and silly. But while going through that, there's been some pretty horrible things she said. One of them was she was defending. Pedophilia is not like cancer or depression or obesity. It is not like that. You're talking some because they are not comparable. Look into it. As a victim, I know, and it's not like that. It's evil and wrong and should not be treated with sympathy. First of all, don't play victim with someone who has been there, done that. Thank you. Secondly, your opinion is your opinion and mine is mine. Get over it. So when that uploaded, people went to Amber's Instagram and said, do you still stand by the comments you made about on Ask FM in 2014? Amber says, trigger warning and trauma dumping. No, I don't. I was 22 years old, trying to understand how people can be so awful. I was actually assaulted by my father's friends when I was younger and talked about this in therapy recently, about how I wish I could understand why those things happened to me. I won't ever understand. These people are sick and forever deserve prison time. In 2014, I was 22. I think she was 23, but I was 22 and highly trying to make excuses for what happened to me.
Cheated on Casey and tried to force him into an open relationship. Talked to Crystal romantically while they were still together, and went to the airport to take a flight with Crystal and to go to Crystal's and live with Crystal literally within the day of them breaking up. Amberlynn also allegedly asked for and received explicit images of Casey underage, which I gather in most places, and specifically the United States, is effectively a crime.
Spicy pictures being sent. I'll put it that way. I'm not very fond of it. I don't like doing that. I'm not. Well, when I was at my Nina's house and I was texting her and whatnot, she wanted a spicy picture. She was asking me about this for a couple weeks. And I was like, I'm not comfortable. And I was 15. Again, I was 15 17. And I just kept telling her, I'm not comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable with that. Why do you want this? Like, I'm not comfortable. And she didn't want like front. She wanted, that's what she wanted. She wanted the below the belt. And I was like, oh, well, no, I'm not comfortable. And I just kept saying, I'm not comfortable with it. But then she said, and I wish I had my old phone, which was a little tiny, like, sliver Motorola. But, she said, if you don't do that, I'm going to be mad. I'm going to break up with you.
Okay.
And at 15, hearing that from someone who you're dating, you're just like, oh no, I don't want to lose the only person who's actually attracted to me.
Yeah.
And I did it.
Yeah.
Amberlynn Reid also, despite being so-called assaulted by Casey, asked him for sex tips when she got with Destiny. Now, as mentioned prior, this happened over a decade ago and has now been brought back up to the platform via Mr. Snowflake's recent videos, which were called The Victims of an Empath. Before we get into the Snowflake video very specifically, like this new one, I want to summarize what happened in the instance of the first time that this was brought up. So Amberlynn Reid made a video that is now deleted where she tells her story about her ex that's allegedly sexually assaulted her, where she described the situations where the ex would hit her and abuse her. This video seemingly came out of nowhere, and I gather that Amberlynn Reid perhaps was trying to get ahead of what was coming out, especially because this was in the Destiny era, which involved a lot of rapid growth on the platform, but also a lot of rapid growth in the ridicule and sort of fascination via the Lolcow culture towards Amberlynn Reid. And Amberlynn is clearly a very calculated person and opportunistic, and she has been throughout essentially the entirety of her channel. And it's not necessarily uncommon to become paranoid, especially when you are actually guilty of something that has occurred to you and people want to get ahead of that. And the best way to get ahead of it is realistically to steal the story that could be used against you in the court of public opinion. Now, often on the internet, especially, this is very common, whether the person is being honest or not, there are eyebrows raised when people have their stories coming out about Saie. But Amberlynn specifically would leave out certain details, would hedge a lot of what she said, say that she didn't remember and that there was gaps because of so-called like a time distance. This sort of benefit of the doubt to a certain degree kind of worked in favor for Amberlynn and sort of didn't. A lot of people did not believe the initial video, and then things really fell apart when Casey came out and told his side of the story in a way that was way more logically structured and had a lot more evidence and realistic like timelines brought about with it. Mr. Snowflake made the Victims of an Empath video and then proceeded to do a 2-hour-long interview with Casey as well. And what Mr. Snowflake does is also shows this one-to-one comparison between Amberlynn Reid's coming out story and Casey's coming out story, which this does a few things. Because given the seemingly meaningless list of reasons that would come with repeating someone else's story, it instead is the purpose to bring this up was exposing a pattern of behavior and potential motives. And this shows essentially the willingness to steal a story. And this pattern then allows for the perfect alignment with the initial allegations that Casey had, where he brought up that Amberlynn was stealing what had happened to him at her hands. After the initial Casey video, Amberlynn Reid made a poetry statement video via the horrific work that is called Rain and Petals Eavesdrop. I'll play a clip of that now.
Speaking Up by Amberlynn Reid. Let's see. Who does everyone believe? Let's start gambling our life, rolling dice like knives on a platter. Who will survive? Will it be the false nightmare you spit, or the reality I have tied to a place of sadness, and now revealed and altered into madness? Why are you going to break the tide and just leave it there? Break the ice and throw the stone and not think twice? Why are you going to play your sins and call me twice? Twice the lies, twice the price, twice the vulgar manipulated web. Spider to friend, friend to spider, enemy grudge and love lost. Using my name to put yours on lights? What happened to all the fights, all the times they turned into goodbyes? No, I am not perfect in any way. No inside the lines, no glitter outside, no gracefully worded rhymes. No playing perfect like you've begun a show that keeps haunting me. The haunt is the demon I'm trying to escape. Escape the pain and outwardly insane. Escape the thoughts and online taunts. Just admit you were wrong and play a different song. Admit the guilt you've sown like a misguided basket case of poisoned sentences. My life is my story, but yet you've written a chapter. The chapter has torn pages, scribbled words of false advertisement. I'm my own narrator, yet you stole the pen to deny, to lie, to prying a life that was fine. Here are the facts. You lied about your name right off the bat, but still called me insane. You put a ring on my finger, promised me forever, yet you kissed her. You kicked and screamed till it was making hate. Forget making love when the love was gone. RAPE, rain and petals, eavesdrop. I used the wrong word. Rain and petals, eavesdrop. I used the wrong word. Rain and petals, eavesdrop. I used the wrong word.
This swayed essentially anyone left who believed in Amberlynn to kind of realize that there was not truth to the statements that she was making, especially given that the basis of the poem says that she embellishes the events as she described them, with the statement essentially being rain and petals eavesdrop. So the first letters of each of the words, I use, so RAPE, right? I use the wrong word, referring to a mishandled approach to such allegations. Casey also talked about this on the live stream with his mom, and Amberlynn has made comments throughout the years, including a story in a video from the Destiny era where she is filming and working at a retirement home or some sort of home, and filming without the consent of those around her, and includes a story of where she's essentially just making fun of her ex-girlfriend who would quote-unquote flatten her boobs on purpose and like make herself look like a boy. Yet Amberlynn is always saying that like she was and has never been transphobic. But anyway,
Ex-girlfriend named Cassidy, she did not look like a girl. Like she taped on her boobs on purpose, so they'd always think that was a boy. So it was just really weird because I'm not into that.
and you have to be like, I don't like him like that. Fast forward to now, Mr. Snowflake releases Victims of an Empath, an Amberlynn Reid series episode 1, Casey. And this video brings up many new allegations that we weren't necessarily aware of prior. It also kind of has a more personal twist than Mr. Snowflake's regular videos that shows a decline in his perception and morale towards Amberlynn from someone who went into making video series with the goal to show people that more or less that Amberlynn Reid was a victim of the YouTube algorithm and the systems in place, to where she's sort of making herself into this caricature for the sake of more fame, meanwhile also doing it at her own expense. But this then turned into Mr. Snowflake kind of realizing where a lot of the vitriol is coming from. So in this, Mr. Snowflake brings up Ask FM posts where she defends pedophilia, brings up the initial allegations from Casey and Amberlynn with additional links, points of reference, comparisons, and analyses. Proves that Amberlynn copied the coming out story, as I mentioned earlier, and exposes messages about or to Casey and Amberlynn's Facebook posts about Casey's family and Casey's mom's boyfriend in particular, as I mentioned. And then also talked about the sort of, they talk about this in the interview rather, but the sort of like sex tips thing and all of the online perceptions that came with that. So that's all for this summary, because I strongly encourage you to watch Mr. Snowflake's video yourself. But let's go now more so into Amberlynn Reid's very pathetic response. Amberlynn, shortly after the interview was released, put out a video titled "The Interview with My Ex, ... and weight loss update, ! Bar vlog," which she released on Boxing Day. This vlog opened with 2.5 minutes of cardigan selection. Then Amber began to preface the oncoming response, used extremely loosely, or the section that I refer to as "I'm about to refuse to take responsibility." She talks about how she's so grateful for her life and we need to live every day, you know, to the fullest and all that kind of bullshit. Seemingly tries to plant this seed of her sort of being the person that we know so well as this good person and the person who's really moved on from this situation, and instead isn't like, you know, loathing in it for the sake of some sort of like malicious intent.
I hope that you guys are having a good day. It's a beautiful day to be alive. I'm just thankful and grateful every single day that I wake up. I have a roof over my head. I have a wonderful job. I have my fur babies that I love so dearly. They're literally my heart. I have great friends and people who are there for me and care about me. Like, I just have a list of things to be grateful for. And sometimes I feel like people just take things for granted.
She goes into saying that she's so far removed. So when she actually decides to quote unquote address it, first off, she refers to it as the elephant in the room, which I think is super stupid because like that's way more than an elephant in the room. The elephant in the room would be something like very silly. Then she goes into saying that she's so far removed and so much older than she was at the time and that she would never again act that way.
That relationship happened when we were both teenagers. We were very, very, very young. And I think watching that interview made me realize more than ever how much I have grown up. I'm at fault for so many things I've done when I was younger. I've done just a few years ago. I have made mistakes. I have learned along the way. But using like I was younger as an excuse, it doesn't justify, it doesn't make things okay. Like, no matter what side of the story that the audience wants to believe, regardless of anything else, it doesn't make anything that happened and that relationship okay.
It gets worse when Amberlynn Reid says that she could start to point out the lies, but she's not going to, which only exists as a comment done for the sake of like manipulation, right? And this serves to do three things: to place doubt in Casey's story, to create a sort of defense based on like semantics that she never said what was or wasn't true, and to morally grandstand over Casey, who has spoken of this recently and goes on and on about how, you know, bringing these things up is bad for both of them. And, you know, that delving into these things is harmful and doesn't serve much of a purpose beyond essentially just trying to like affect someone's life negatively. Amberlynn is going off about all this stuff in regard to, I'm not going to say XYZ thing, referring to specifically like a so-called ability to point out lies, to point out indiscrepancies, to show the haters who's boss, right? Here's the ticket, right? Let's be real. Her saying, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to point out where the lies are. I'm not going to point out this, poses to just make herself better than Casey and to leave holes for these very manipulative, out of context semantic arguments that Amberlynn Reid does, which is her biggest thing in this so-called manipulative side. And frankly, the thing that enrages me the most. Now, this is a very simple way of doing this, and I perceive it's because this is maybe the rhetor rather in question is not necessarily the sharpest knife in the drawer, but it's just so she could say, well, I never actually said anything, and I said I wasn't going to say it. So you pointing out this lie because I'm trying to defend myself is you just being horrible to me, XYZ reasons again. And it's just really annoying and exhausting when clearly you need to take responsibility for something in your life, because backpedaling every time you even slightly say something isn't saying anything, then you're just canceling it out. Anyway, that's my thoughts on that.
I know a lot of people are asking me about it, and I'm simply not going to talk about it. Like, one thing you're not going to catch me doing is sitting here saying, well, he lied about this, this is actually what happened. It's not going to happen here. I care more about moving on, letting go. I'm not going to say this has been easy for me, by no means. I have shed some tears, but there's power in knowing that him and I are adults now, and we get to choose which route we take. And this is the one that I'm choosing to take, and I'm actually really happy with that. And I just wish him nothing but happiness and wellness. That's what matters to me.
Which again, Casey has been dealing with this and the repercussions of this for years and years in their personal life, even outside of the internet, and was someone who wanted to do kind of internet related things even before Amberlynn Reid started her channel, and had that essentially opportunity stripped from him, given the fact that there will always be the association with that person that dated Amberlynn once. Amberlynn finishes this monologue with talking about how mature she is. Essentially, seconds before, she says she struggles to put a mop together and that she made her girlfriends do that for her. So you think about even recalling back to the things that Casey said about Amberlynn Reid refusing to do anything and then acting out very aggressively when things would not be done for her. Just for like a shine of that behavior to even come out immediately after this addressing of the situation, which to me is just wild. About an hour before I started editing this video, Amberlynn Reid put out my goals for 2024, a birthday surprise, and Target haul ! bar vlog. This is a equally pathetic comeback to the pathetic nature of the response, I'd say. I can't say legally on the YouTubies not to watch it, that is all, but she just says she wants to lose 100 pounds this year. We all doubt that due to just basic pattern recognition. She does not even mention why it had been longer than normal since she uploaded, not wanting to steer people back to the previous video that even gives a crumb of attention to those haters, those pathetic essayists that dare criticize her. The like to dislikes on this are, it's about 30% liked. It maybe 25% like to dislike ratio. So, it's balling as usual. Really stupid way to come back. The comments are not great. People just joking about how Amberlynn is just doing a bunch of New Year's goals, the same thing that she always does. And I think people have actually listed them in order for her to not need to even really watch the video. And I think that it's a really good time to just recycle the same videos to put the focus back onto the cycle to divert focus from this. Now, what's interesting too is someone actually tweeted, I will find the exact tweet right now, you can hear me clicking, that says that essentially, which I talked about this on stream, but the whole foodie beauty debacle, this says, this is from @Pete'sOfShit. Amberlynn realizing she just got away with abuse / allegations because Salah asked someone to shit on his face. This is in reference to the recent stuff, foodie beauty. If you want, live stream I just did in the Girl World playlist, that will be, all that stuff is there for you. But moral story is, Amberlynn is just doing any which way and any possible out to divert attention, and is grateful for any possible diversion. And it's just really frustrating. I think especially because it even seems like she's so egotistical about getting around this that even her manipulation feels lazy. And all in all, this is not anything that anyone would have ever wanted. But keep balling, Amberlynn, as your views decline. Anyway. And with this, we'll move on to part 3. Part 3 is context and shift within Girl World. So Girl World exists as a sort of Lolcow community. And if you want to learn what it is, I explain that through the Rhetoric of Amberlynn Reid. And also, if you're talking about Lolcows, I talk about that in my Daniel Larson and World T-shirts video, which I'll put both of those in the description for you. But with Lolcow communities, essentially, there are many moral questions that come up because at the foundation of what a Lolcow is and what those communities consist of, it's per their internet character, and people, usually these internet characters have horrible skeletons in their closet, and the community exists to essentially steer the person into their demise or very close to it to witness. And Girl World exists as a sort of almost more PG Lolcow community because most of them are very, very, very dark. And per the YouTube corner, for the most part, it's somewhat more innocent. There's a lot of people who are very against what they call cow tipping, which means affecting their actual real lives. There's a lot of people who won't comment on Amberlynn if certain bad things happen, or won't delve into certain instances in particular above others. There's a bit more of a carefulness of the audience and the environment when we're talking about Amberlynn and that community, as opposed to, let's say, somebody like Chris Chan. When we're talking about Amberlynn specifically, she sits in this sort of ecosystem, very codependent with reaction channels. And this creates a sort of rhetorical community that exists within this ecosystem. And most seasoned Girl World people know this. So now there comes the question, so that if now we're seeing even more truth, rather, I guess, coming out of these allegations, and given that the reaction channels serve as a means of keeping Amberlynn Reid relevant, what moral questions are important to analyze here, and what importance comes through when we're addressing these sorts of things? So I want to read a small section from this textbook that I used called, and I'll tell you in a second, called Rhetorical Theory and Introduction by Timothy Borchers and Heather Hundley. And they have a section that refers to specifically the communities that come with it. Our study of rhetoric will also address the rhetoric that exists in popular culture, such as television, programs, clothing, music, or magazines. When you watch a television show, for instance, you are being subtly influenced in many ways. However, you aren't asked necessarily to vote on any kind of decision. And remember, people refer to Amberlynn as kind of and Zachary Michael says this in a few videos, and I wish I could pull right away what it is, but he almost kind of views it, he says, as sort of almost a TLC show. Or Oh Lordy, It's Jordy says seasons, right? There's this perception of that sort of kind of comparison to classic media. You do, however, participate in a discussion about the kinds of values and beliefs our culture celebrates. In this way, we form our individual and collective identities by sharing rhetorical situations with other individuals. This is that community within the reaction channels. And the reaction channels structure their content in a way that makes the very, very, very boring and dry and redundant Amberlynn Reid content into something that is a communal analysis as opposed to just something that exists on face value. For example, like I don't have a reaction community, right? There's no community keeping me relevant in regard to like their addressing of my content. Rather, I keep my relevance by commenting on other things, right? In this way, we form our individual and collective identities by sharing rhetorical situations with other individuals. In a sense, the rhetorical community for this type of exchange consists of all members in the culture in which rhetoric occurs. We all are, potentially, influenced by the rhetoric of television, film, advertising, and content on the internet. Keep in mind that the audience for a particular rhetoric might be quite large and not easily identified. Some theorists further complicate the idea of the speaker-audience relationship by suggesting such a distinction obscures a relationship between rhetoric and audience. Communications scholar Michael Calvin McGee made the point that in contemporary culture, the audience member often does the job of assembling rhetorical messages. And this is something that's also extremely vital when we're talking about the keeping the relevance, because a lot of reaction channels, even myself included, were once audience members, rather either of Amber or of other reaction channels. And the internet especially allows for that audience to gain access. And again, the more people that talk about her, the more people that discuss these things, they hold her relevance. Now, with this particular situation, also, there's the moral dilemma of wanting to bring forth and sort of expose this darkness in hopes that it doesn't happen again, because Amberlynn also tends to get her partners off of Instagram DMs with her fans. And I think something that we need to note too is that it's different to bring up allegations and super serious events and as they happen and to literally commentate on like every single thing that she does all the time. Now, again, I digest that content as my means of keeping up with her because I can't watch her videos. I think they're bunk. I feel like a hypocrite on one hand, but I don't really know necessarily what communal shift will occur. But then I feel like there just needs to be one. The sources of rhetoric are often unknown to us. Instead, we're surrounded by fragments of their messages that we combine and create meaningful whole message. Consider use of social media. You likely engage with several sources at the same time, such as Twitter, Facebook, and Snapchat. They each display articles, posts, and texts that you combine to form your opinions about your friends, your school, and your world. This could be, for example, looking at Amberlynn on social media, looking at people that commentate on her, looking at the reaction videos and things of the sort. You, the audience member, are assembling fragments of the rhetorical message to create a new rhetorical text. In essence, argued McGee, you've become the creator of the rhetorical message. And and then it just says that they talk about this more later in the book. So that is sort of, I find, the basis of what might be the contemplation and process that comes in with talking about people like Amberlynn Reid. But that's essentially just my food for thought. And like I said, I think it's important to expose wrongdoings. On the other hand, it's kind of wrong to keep somebody who seems to be kind of a monster relevant to the platform that she can use to do these things. And because many of the reaction channels do interact with Amberlynn Reid directly. And Lolcows are not normally covered in the mainstream too. That's another thing. Tom Harlock, like 40 minutes ago or an hour ago, put out a video on Foodie Beauty. So that's also exposing someone who's like very dangerous and horrible into that sort of mainstream. So, like, Amberlynn is, like, and Foodie Beauty are essentially, like, one of the most popular kind of Lolcow types when there's channels with million-plus subscribers talking about them. So that's just kind of my thoughts on it, I guess. Anyway, to conclude, things just somehow always get worse. And speaking of things just keep getting worse, I was going on TikTok to get the video that I like to put at the end to cheer us up after such grueling topics, anyway. And yeah, we've got Amberlynn on the brink of, or I guess the edge or something, of literal essay allegations, making a video about body count resetting to a Nicki Minaj song. And I think I genuinely just beg her to, like, think for 30 seconds. And it just gets me more and more annoyed. Anyway, what a yikes. Comment down below if you got to this point. How do you feel about this? Because I'm curious. Anyway, that is all to conclude. And this particular situation I might update on as things progress, because as of right now, Amberlynn hasn't uploaded in a few days despite it being like Juicer AdSense month, so we'll see what happens. Links, source, ways to support the channel all down below, along with an email to suggest content. Happy New Year to everyone watching, and I'll see you when I see you.
Honestly, he's an angel, okay? He's a really good kid. Just don't look him in the eyes, okay? Whatever you guys do, that's all I gotta say. That's my... Hey there, little guy. What's going on?
Hi. Are you prepared to die?